The pounding came just after midnight. 3 hard blows struck the wooden door built into the mountainside. Snow pushed through the cracks around its frame, then melted before it could reach the stone floor. Hannah Merritt stood beside the fire, 18 years old. A wool coat hung loose on her thin shoulders. Her dark braid rested over one collarbone. In her right hand, she held an iron poker. In her left, her father's old rifle. Her knuckles had gone white on the wood of the stock. The pounding came again, louder this time. "Hannah!" a man shouted from the other side. His voice cracked halfway through her name. "Please, for God's sake, open the door." She knew that voice. 6 weeks ago, Sheriff Elias Ward had stood on the boardwalk of Red Willow and watched her belongings dumped into the frozen mud. He had not looked at her once. Not when Silas Thorne read the false debt aloud. Not when Mercy Callahan was pushed back into the crowd. Not when Hannah climbed onto the broken wagon and drove her mother's mule north into the Bitterroot Mountains. Now the sheriff was on his knees. She could hear it in his breathing. "Hannah, there's a child out here. He can't feel his feet." Then a second voice caught through the wind. Colder. Steadier. "We know what your father built in there, girl." Open the door. Silas Thorne. Hannah's hand tightened on the rifle until her wrist ached. But she did not lift the wooden bar. Not yet. She closed her eyes. And the wind outside became the wind of 6 weeks earlier. The one that had carried her mother away. Red Willow, Montana Territory. October 1889. The town sat in a valley the shape of a spoon. A church at one end. A general store at the other. And a river between them that froze solid every November and stayed frozen until April. The Merritt cabin stood at the north edge of town. 2 rooms. A stone chimney. A porch her father had built the year Hannah was born. Behind it, a small garden where Ruth Merritt grew mint and yarrow and chamomile in the summer, and where she kept a bundle of dried foxglove hanging under the eaves. "For the heart," she said. For old folks whose blood ran slow. Ruth Merritt was 52 years old that autumn, a widow of 1 year. Ezra had died the winter before, coughing blood into a rag by the fire. Lung sickness, the doctor said. Nothing to be done. But Ezra had done something. Before he died, he had held Hannah's hand and whispered, "The mountain." Irehorn. "It's ours, girl. Papers with the county clerk. Don't ever sell it. Promise me." Hannah had promised. She was 17 then. She did not understand what he meant. She only understood the sound of her father's voice going thin. He was buried in the churchyard behind the pines. Ruth had planted wild roses over him. They had bloomed once in June. Small pink flowers with no scent. Now it was October. And Ruth was dying too. Hannah did not know it yet. She only knew her mother was tired. Her mother's hand shook when she poured the morning tea. Her mother's eyes had gone yellow at the edges. And her mother's heartbeat, when Hannah pressed an ear to her chest at night, was not the steady drum it used to be. It was a rabbit in a trap. Fast, then slow, then fast again. "Just old age," Ruth said, and smiled. "You're not old, Mama. Old enough. Let me get Doc Winters. Doc Winters costs $3. We have 4. Then we spend 3. Hannah." That was all. Just her name. The way her mother said it meant stop arguing. Hannah stopped, because her mother had a way of turning a word into a door and closing it. They drank tea every evening. Ruth bought the tea from Thorne's general store. Loose leaves in a brown paper twist. A special blend, Thorne said, made from mountain herbs. Good for the nerves. Good for the heart. Good for a widow who couldn't sleep. Ruth trusted Silas Thorne. She had known him 20 years. He had come to Ezra's funeral. He had held her hand at the graveside. He had said, "Anything you need, Ruth. Anything." He gave her the tea for free. Every Wednesday. Wrapped in that same brown paper. Because that's what neighbors did in Red Willow. That's what the church said. Love thy neighbor. Hannah did not like the tea. It was bitter. It left a metal taste on her tongue. She only drank 1 cup. On Sundays. To please her mother, Ruth drank it every night. The morning came in November. A gray Tuesday. Frost on the windows. The kind of cold that makes the wood in the walls creak like an old ship. Hannah woke first. She always did. She built up the fire. Put water on for coffee. Went to the pantry for the last of the bacon. And realized she hadn't heard her mother's cough. Ruth coughed every morning now. A dry sound. Like paper tearing. Silence. Hannah stood in the kitchen. Bacon in her hand. Waiting. Nothing. She set the bacon down. She walked to her mother's room. The door was open a finger's width. She pushed it slowly. Because she already knew. She already knew, and did not want to know. Her body knew before her mind did. Her legs went cold. Her hand on the door went cold. Ruth Merritt lay on her back. The blanket pulled up to her chin. Her hair loose across the pillow. Her eyes closed. Peaceful. Hannah walked to the bed. She sat down on the edge. She did not cry. She could not. Her chest had gone hollow. Like someone had scooped it clean. Her mother's right hand rested on the quilt. In it, a folded piece of paper. Hannah took it. Gently. She opened it. Hannah, my girl, if you are reading this, I have not much strength today. My heart is not right. Doc Winters came yesterday when you were out. He told me the truth I already knew. He said, the letter ended there. The pen had rolled onto the floor. Hannah picked it up. It was still wet with ink. She held the pen, and the letter, and her mother's hand. For a long time, she did not move. Because if she did not move, the morning would not continue. Her mother would still be here. The fire would still be warm. The bacon would still be on the counter. If she did not move, time would not come for her. But time comes anyway. Time always comes. Hannah leaned forward. She pressed her forehead to her mother's cheek. And she whispered, "Mama, wait for me. I don't know how yet, but wait for me." The funeral was 3 days later. The whole town came. Because that's what Red Willow did for widows. That's what neighbors did. Mercy Callahan brought bread. Ida Whitaker brought a pot of stew. The Reverend spoke about a woman of quiet virtue. Doc Winters stood at the back, with his hat in his hands, nodding, because there was nothing else to nod at. Sheriff Elias Ward came in a black coat too small for his shoulders. He stood beside the grave. He did not look at Hannah. Silas Thorne did not come. Hannah noticed. She noticed the way you notice a chair missing from a room you sat in 1,000 times. Something wrong. Something you can't quite name. Silas Thorne. The man who had held Ruth's hand at Ezra's grave 1 year ago. The man who had said, "Anything you need, Ruth." Anything. The man whose Wednesday tea had sat in Ruth's cabinet in a brown paper twist. 10 of them. Neatly folded. Enough for 2 more months. He did not come. Hannah did not cry at the funeral. She stood at the head of the grave. She held Mercy Callahan's hand. She said thank you to everyone who passed by. She did not cry until she got home. Until she opened the cabinet. until she took the 10 packets into her hands and smelled them, and did not know why she was smelling them. But her body knew. Her body was starting to understand something her mind refused to see. 3 days after the funeral they came. Hannah was on the porch, sweeping, because sweeping was something you could do, something the hands remembered. She had swept twice already that morning. 3 horses came up the road. Silas Thorne, Sheriff Elias Ward, and Mayor Bradley Coombs. Thorne wore a black coat, a silver watch chain across his vest. His boots had been polished that morning. She could see the sunlight on them from 30 yards. He tipped his hat. "Miss Merritt." Hannah did not tip her head back. She said, "Sheriff, what is this?" Elias Ward looked at the ground. Coombs cleared his throat. "Hannah, we come with hard news. Town council met yesterday. Without me. Without your father, unfortunately. Your father, God rest him, owed Silas here $45 from last spring for seed and salt and the new plow. My father paid for the plow in cash. I was there." Thorne smiled. Small, kind, the way a snake is patient. "Miss Merritt, if you would look at the paper." He held it out. Hannah did not take it at first. Then she did. It was a death slip. Standard form. County paper. "I, Ezra Merritt, do owe the sum of $45 to Silas Thorne of Red Willow, Montana, to be paid before the first frost of the year 1889. If not paid, security shall be the Merritt homestead and lower field." At the bottom, a signature. E. Merritt. Hannah's eyes went straight to the E. Her father's E. Her father's E had a small hook at the top, like a fish hook. He had shown her once. When she was 10, he had said, "That's how you know a Merritt signed a thing, girl." The hook. Always the hook. The E on this paper had no hook. The E on this paper was straight, like a bookkeeper's E, like Thorne's own E. Hannah looked up. Her voice was quiet, very quiet. "This is a forgery." Sheriff Ward's eyes went further into the ground. Coombs shifted in the saddle. "Now, Hannah, this is a forgery, Mr. Coombs. My father did not write this." Thorne's smile did not move. "The signature has been verified by 2 witnesses." "Which 2 witnesses?" "Deacon Riles and Mr. Whitaker." "Mr. Whitaker is dead." "He has been dead 2 years." Silence. Long silence. Coombs cleared his throat again. His throat seemed to be a thing that needed constant clearing. "Hannah, the council has ruled. The homestead and the lower field passed to Silas Thorne in payment of debt. You may keep the wagon and what you can load onto it. The lower field is my father's. The mountain is my father's. The mountain is not part of this ruling. Then the mountain is still mine." Coombs did not answer, because he did not know. He had no idea about the mountain. He had no idea about the land deed her father had filed 12 years earlier. He had no idea about the papers, with the county seal in Missoula, 70 miles south. But Silas Thorne knew. Thorne knew about the mountain, and Hannah saw it, in the small tightening at the corner of his mouth. When she said the word, mountain, he knew. They gave her 1 hour to pack. 1 hour to take 18 years of a life and fold it into a broken wagon. Hannah took her mother's Bible. She took the wool coat her father had left on the peg by the door. She took 2 blankets, a sack of cornmeal, an iron kettle, an axe, her mother's sewing box, the framed daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. She took her father's old rifle, the one he had used to shoot the elk in '82. the one he had taught her to load when she was 12. She did not take the tea. She left the 10 packets in the cabinet, because she wanted Silas Thorne to walk into her mother's kitchen and see them, and know she had seen them too. The whole town came out for it. Not to help, to watch. That was the thing about Red Willow. When something ugly happened, people did not turn away. They came to the edges, to the porches, to the boardwalks. They stood behind curtains and pretended to be doing something else. Hannah climbed onto the wagon. The mule was old. His name was Solomon. He had been her mother's mule. He was 15 years old and mostly gray around the eyes. She snapped the reins gentle. Solomon started to walk. That was when Mercy Callahan came out of the crowd. Mercy was 50 years old, a widow herself. Her husband had died in a mine collapse 15 years back. She had run the bakery ever since. She was small, round, with flour permanently in the seams of her apron. She carried a loaf of bread, not wrapped in cloth like a gift, just held in her hands, warm, fresh from the oven. Silas Thorne stepped in front of her. "Mrs. Callahan, the council has ruled." Mercy did not stop walking. She walked around him. She came to the side of the wagon. She reached up, and she pressed the bread into Hannah's lap. Then she did something no one expected. She got down on her knees, in the frozen mud, right there in the street. She took Hannah's hand, and she kissed it. "Your father left me something, child," she whispered. "For a day I hoped would never come. It is inside the bread. Do not open it here. Do not open it until you are past the pines." Hannah's throat closed. "Mercy, go on now. The mountain will keep you. Your father knew. Your mother knew. Now you will know." She stood up. She brushed the mud off her apron. She did not look at Thorne when she walked away. She walked back into her bakery, and she shut the door. Hannah did not cry then either. She snapped the reins. Solomon walked north. The pines swallowed the town within an hour. She stopped at the first creek, because she could not wait any longer. She unwrapped the bread on her lap. The crust was still warm. It smelled like her childhood, like every Sunday morning she had ever known. Inside, deep in the center, a small leather book, wrapped in oilcloth. She lifted it out. The cover was worn. The initials burned into the leather. E.M. Ezra Merritt. Hannah opened the book with fingers that had gone numb from more than cold. The first page was dated October 2nd, 1888, a month before her father died. The handwriting was his. Small, careful, the letters slanting right. "Hannah, if you are reading this, then Mercy has given it to you, which means the day I feared has come, which means your mother is gone too, and Thorne has moved against you." Hannah stopped reading. She put the book down on her knees. She put her hands over her face. And the sound that came out of her was not crying. It was something older than crying. Something a body does when it finally understands a thing it has been refusing to understand. The bacon on the counter. The rabid heartbeat of her mother's chest. The yellow at the corners of the eyes. The tea from Silas Thorne. Her mother had been murdered. Slowly, kindly, by a smiling neighbor, who came to her husband's funeral and held her hand. Hannah made herself read the rest. The tea, Hannah. The Wednesday tea. I found the packets in your mother's cabinet 3 months ago. I took one to old Elias Winter, the chemist in Missoula. He is a friend of mine. He tested it. Foxglove leaf, Hannah. Ground fine. Mixed in. A little bit will not kill a person. It will only weaken the heart. Slow. Over months. so the doctor will call it old age, so the neighbors will nod at the funeral, so no one will ask the right question. I could not prove it in a way a court would hear. 2 witnesses signed his forgery on my death slip last spring. Both are dead or in his pocket. I have been quiet. I have been trying to keep you both safe, but I have grown weak. My lungs are failing me faster than my mind. I do not think I will see the spring. If Thorn has moved on our home, he will move on the mountain next. Because the mountain is what he wants. It has always been the mountain. 12 years ago, I found a cave on the south face of Ironhorn. A place no one knew. A hot spring runs deep beneath the rock. I built the beginning of a shelter there. I did not finish. I could not finish alone. Look for the stone shaped like a broken tooth. Above the cedar ridge. That is the door. And Hannah, there is a man on the mountain. A young man. Half Blackfeet, half white. His name is Wyatt Holloway. He lives in a cabin at the western draw. I saved his mother's life 18 years ago. She promised him to me. She said if my child ever came to the mountain, he would answer. He owes me a life. I ask him now to pay it. I love you, girl. I loved your mother. I could not save her. Save yourself? Papa. Hannah sat by the creek a long time. The sun moved. The mule drank. A jay screamed once in the trees and went silent. She did not cry anymore. Something else was happening inside her chest. Something colder than tears. Something harder. She put the book back into the oilcloth. She wrapped it. She put it in the deep pocket of her father's wool coat. She looked north. Ironhorn rose there. A mountain the color of old iron under a low autumn sky. 600 meters higher than the town. Maybe more. The kind of mountain that took a full day to climb even in summer. And it was not summer. She snapped the reins. Solomon walked on. The trail narrowed after the second mile. Then it narrowed more. By noon, she was leading Solomon on foot, because the wagon could no longer fit between the trees. The wagon rocked. Once. Twice. Then a wheel struck a buried stone, and the wooden rim split with a crack like a rifle shot. The wagon dropped. Hannah landed on her hands and knees in the gravel. Her palms tore open. She sat on the trail, looking at her own blood on the stones. Solomon stood a few feet ahead, confused, dragging the broken axle a step or two before he stopped. She untied him. She sat back, because her legs had gone soft. Because everything was too much. Because a wheel had broken, and her mother was dead, and her father was dead, and the sky was going gray, and the wind was starting to come from the north the wrong way. Because she was 18 years old, and alone, on a mountain. She let herself sit for 1 full minute. That was all. 1 minute. Then she stood up. She loaded what she could carry onto Solomon's back. The kettle, the cornmeal, the 2 blankets, the Bible, the daguerreotype, the rifle over her shoulder, the leather book in her father's coat. She left everything else beside the wagon. She walked. The snow began around 3 in the afternoon. At first, small flakes, like sand. Then bigger, like coins falling out of a torn pocket in the sky. By dusk, she could not see the trail. She was walking by memory now, by her father's map, by the shape of the ridge above the tree line. Look for the stone shaped like a broken tooth. She found it at last light. A slab of pale granite, leaning out from the trees, split down the middle by some old lightning strike from before her grandfather was born. Behind it, a tangle of brush, cedar branches piled against the mountainside. Hannah pushed through. A dark opening. She struck a match. The flame bent inward. Air was moving. Something inside the mountain was breathing. She led Solomon in. The tunnel widened after 30 feet. The walls went dry. The ground sloped down. And then, quite suddenly, a round chamber, big enough for a mule, and a small house. Hannah lit her lantern. She held it up, and she saw her father's hand everywhere. She recognized his work the way a daughter recognizes her father's handwriting. Stones stacked in his careful way. A ledge cut into the wall at exactly hip height, because Ezra Merritt was 5 feet 9, and he made his workspaces at hip height. Along one wall, a shallow clay channel ran the length of the room. Flat stones covered part of it. A thin ribbon of vapor rose from a crack in the floor near the back. She held her hand above it. Warm, warm air. From deep below. A hot spring runs beneath the rock. He had built the first part of the system, the channel that would move the warm air. But only the first part. Half the stones had not been laid. The lower vent that would draw fresh air in from the south face, the entrance was there, but not sealed against the weather. It was covered only in pine needles and old brush. The door at the main entrance was a frame. No planks. No hinges. Just posts sunk into the rock. He had not finished. He had not lived to finish. Hannah set down her pack. Slowly, she said out loud to no one, "Papa, what did you leave me?" Solomon huffed. His breath rolled in the lantern light. She turned in a slow circle, counting. She had 2 blankets, 1 kettle, half a sack of cornmeal, an axe, a rifle, 12 matches, 1 book of her father's writing, and a mountain that was almost, but not quite, a home. She had one night, before the storm came in full. She did not sit down. She got to work. She burned a small fire that night against the warm channel. She cooked cornmeal in the kettle. She ate half. She saved half for morning. She gave Solomon a handful of oats. She rubbed his shoulders with dry grass. She spoke to him low, the way her mother had spoken to him for 15 years. "You are a good old boy, Solomon. You brought me here. That's a good day's work." He pressed his nose into her palm. She slept beside him, because it was warmer that way, because she needed to hear something breathing that was not her own. The Bible was under her head, and in the Bible, a dried wildflower fell out when she opened it in the lantern light. A small white flower with a bent stem. Hannah did not remember her mother pressing it. She could not remember when, but she knew what it was. It was the flower Ruth Merritt had carried at her wedding. She had told Hannah once, when Hannah was 10, when they were folding sheets together in the summer sun. "Just one. I picked it on the way to the church. I wanted something wild." Your father laughed. He said I was the last woman in Montana who would rather have a weed than a rose. Hannah held the flower against her face. She did not sleep for a long time. But when she did, for the first night since her mother had died, she did not dream of the bacon on the counter. She dreamed of her mother's voice, saying her name. Hannah. Just that. Hannah. Like a door opening, not closing. She woke to a sound she did not know. Boots. On stone. Outside. She sat up. Fast. Her hand went to the rifle, before her mind was fully awake. She rolled off the blanket. She got to one knee. She lifted the rifle to her shoulder. The sound stopped at the entrance. A man's voice. "Ma'am, I'm not armed." "Well, that's a lie. I've got a knife. Everyone's got a knife. But my rifle is on the ground, 2 steps behind me, and I'm gonna keep my hands where you can see them." Hannah did not lower the rifle. "Step into the light. Slow. Yes, ma'am. He stepped in. He was tall. 23, maybe. 24. Wearing an elk-hide coat. Long dark hair tied back with a leather cord. His skin was dark from wind, not from summer. And running from his left temple to the corner of his mouth, a scar. Old. White. Rope thin. The kind you get from a bear claw when the bear is very close and very angry. His hands were up, palms open. He said, "You are Ezra Merritt's daughter." Hannah's throat went tight. "How do you know?" "Because you've got his eyes. Because you're sleeping in the cave he told me his daughter would come to. Because your mule out there is the same mule I saw hitched to his wagon 4 years ago in Red Willow." She did not lower the rifle. "Say your name." "Wyatt Holloway. Your father saved my mother's life when I was 5 years old. She died 10 years back. Before she died, she made me promise. She said, if Ezra Merritt's blood ever comes to this mountain you go, you give what he needs. You promised a dying woman?" "I did. And here you are. Here I am." Hannah's arms were tired. The rifle was heavy, but she did not lower it. "How do I know you didn't come here for the mountain? For the gold?" Wyatt Holloway went very still. Something moved in his eyes. "Ma'am, if I wanted the gold, then I've had 18 years to take it. I've known where this cave was since I could walk. My mother brought me up here once when I was 6. Your father showed her. He trusted her. She trusted him. If I wanted the gold, ma'am, I would have taken it already." Silence. Long silence. The lantern hissed. Hannah lowered the rifle. Slowly, she let the barrel rest on her knee. She said, "There's cornmeal. Cold. From last night." He let out a breath. His shoulders dropped. Slightly. He said, "That's the kindest thing I've heard in 3 months, ma'am." She said, "My name is Hannah." "Not ma'am." He said, "Hannah." He tried the name once. Careful. Like a man handling something that might break. She pointed to the far side of the fire. He sat down. That was how it began. He worked. By noon of that first day, he had cut cedar planks with the folding saw he carried in his pack. By dusk, he had hung the first true door on the main entrance. He had shown Hannah how to seal the frame with tow and pine tar. By the end of the second day, he had opened the lower vent on the south face. He had crawled in with a lantern and cleared it. He had shown Hannah where the air moved, how it entered cold from the south, passed the heated stone deep in the mountain, and rose warm through the clay channel. He said, "Never block the lower vent, even for 1 hour. If you block it, the fire uses up the air. And the air uses up you." Hannah nodded. She wrote it down in her father's book, on a blank page at the back, in her own handwriting. Never block the lower vent. The days settled into a shape. He came in the morning, from his cabin at the western draw. 2 hours' walk. He worked until dusk. He ate what Hannah cooked. He drank the water she boiled. Then he walked back. He did not stay the night. Not once. He was careful about that. Hannah understood without being told. A woman alone. A man alone. A town below that would tear both of them apart for pleasure if it got the chance. But every morning he was there. Rain. Snow. Wind. Whatever the mountain gave, he was there. On the 5th day, she learned he could not read. They were sitting by the fire. She had opened her mother's Bible to read a psalm, because her mother had read a psalm every night, and Hannah did not know what else to do with her hands. She looked up. She said, "Do you want me to read out loud?" He said, If you like, she read, Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. When she finished, he was looking at the page. He said, That is a beautiful thing. What you can do. She did not understand at first. He said, I never learned. My mother knew a little. Enough to teach me my name. But she died before she got further. And Red Willow, the school, Red Willow does not take Blackfeet children in the classroom. Hannah closed the Bible. She said, I will teach you. If you want. He looked at her. His face did not change much. It did not have to. She saw it in his eyes. That thing. The thing a person does when they have wanted something a long time and never asked. He said, Yes. She said, Tomorrow. He said, Tomorrow. They started with the alphabet. In the dirt beside the fire. With a stick. A, B, C. He learned faster than she expected. A man who cannot read is not a man who cannot think. Wyatt Holloway thought in careful lines. He knew patterns. He knew shapes. Letters were shapes. By the end of the first week, he could read her name in the dirt. Hannah. He looked at it a long time. Then he wrote his own beside it. Wyatt, he said, that is the first time I have ever seen it written by my own hand. Hannah's eyes went hot. She looked away. She said, The fire needs another log. He said, It does not. She said, It does. She got up anyway, because if she did not, she was going to cry. And she had promised herself not to cry in front of this man, because she had already cried enough for one autumn. And she wanted the tears she had left to be for her mother. But Wyatt Holloway was not a stranger anymore. She was beginning to understand that. 3 weeks in, she found the deed. She had been clearing a small hollow in the back wall of the cave, behind a loose stone, because her father had left a tiny mark on that stone, a chip in the shape of an M, and she had finally figured out what the mark meant. The hollow was 6 inches deep. Inside, a bundle wrapped in wax cloth. She brought it to the fire. Wyatt looked up from the letter he was tracing on a scrap of birch bark. She unwrapped it slowly. 2 papers. The first was a land deed, filed with a county clerk in Missoula, dated April 1877, signed by Ezra Merritt, witnessed by 2 men, sealed with the county's imprint. Ezra Merritt is hereby recognized as sole owner of the following: the southern face of Ironhorn Mountain, a tract of 512 acres, beginning at the Cedar Ridge and extending north to the summit. 12 years earlier, long before Thorne had ever asked to buy it, the mountain was hers. Legally, cleanly, undeniably. The second paper was a letter, on the letterhead of Silas Thorne, dated May 1885. For years ago. Ezra, I offer $600 for the south face of Ironhorn. This is my final price. I have reason to believe there is gold beneath the ridge. If you sell, you and Ruth will live comfortably the rest of your days. If you refuse, I will find another way. Silas Thorne. At the bottom, in Thorne's own handwriting, a note. Small, as though he had written it to himself. If Merritt will not sell, there is always another way. Hannah put the papers down on her knees. She sat very still. Wyatt was watching her. He did not ask. She said, It was never about the debt. He said, What was it about? Gold. Under this mountain. That's what he came for. That's why my mother. She could not finish the sentence. He did not make her finish it. He reached across the fire. He put his hand on top of hers. Just once. Just briefly. Then he took it away. He said, Then we finish the door tomorrow, and we make it strong." Hannah looked at him. Through the lantern light. Through the smoke. She said, "Yes." We finished the door. That night, after Wyatt had gone home to his cabin, Hannah did not sleep for a long time. She sat by the warm channel, with the 2 papers in her lap, and her mother's Bible beside her, and the small dried wildflower pressed between her fingers. She spoke to her mother, out loud, in the quiet, because the mountain was quiet enough to speak into. She said, "Mama, I know what happened to you now. I know who did it. I know why." She said, "I want to hate him. I want to lie awake and think of hurting him. I want to, and I am going to have to teach myself not to, because you would not want that, because Papa would not want that, because if I hate him, I become smaller. And you did not raise a small woman." She said, "But I do not know yet how to forgive him, Mama. So I am not going to lie to you. I am going to try. That is all I can promise. I am going to try," she said, "and I am going to stay on this mountain. I am going to make a home in it, because Papa built it for me, because you would have loved it." She almost laughed. "She almost did," she said. "Wait for me, Mama. I still don't know how, but wait." She stood up. She walked to the mouth of the cave. She pushed the door open a crack. The night sky was clear. The stars were the winter stars now. Sharp. Close. The kind of stars that feel like they are watching. Down in the valley, Red Willow was a small cluster of yellow windows. 600 meters below. Almost invisible. Somewhere down there, Silas Thorne was probably sitting by his fire, drinking whiskey, thinking about the gold he believed he was about to own. He did not know she was alive. That was the first advantage she had ever had over him. Hannah stood in the cold, her breath rolling out in white ribbons. She said, one more time, quietly, the way you make a promise you intend to keep. "I will not run again." Then she added, quieter, "But I will not become him either." She closed the door. She barred it. She went back to the fire, to Solomon, to her mother's Bible. Above the mountain, the first heavy clouds of the winter were beginning to move down from the north. The storm was still 6 days away, but it was coming, and it was going to bring the whole town of Red Willow with it right up the mountain to her door. The days grew shorter. That was the first thing Hannah noticed. The mountain took the light earlier than the valley. By 4 in the afternoon, the sun was already sliding behind the western ridge. And by 5, the cave mouth was blue with dusk. She began to work by the shape of the light. Mornings for hauling wood. Afternoons for the inside work. Evenings for the fire, for the Bible, for teaching Wyatt his letters. She had a rhythm now, which was strange, because 6 weeks ago, her rhythm had been her mother's breathing at night in the next room. And now her rhythm was a mule, and a stranger, and a mountain. But it was a rhythm. She held on to it. Wyatt Holloway came at first light every day. He brought things. A brace of rabbits one morning. A tin of black tea another. A wool blanket, patched but sound, that had belonged to his mother. He never made a show of it. He would put the thing down inside the door. He would take off his gloves. He would say, "Good morning, Hannah." He would go to work. Hannah learned to do the same. She stopped thanking him for every rabbit, because after the third one, he had looked at her with a small tired smile and said, "Hannah, if you thank me every time I bring meat, we are going to have a very long winter." She had laughed then, a short surprised laugh, the first laugh since her mother had died. He had heard it. He had looked up from the door hinge he was fitting. He had said, "That is a good sound." Then he had gone back to work. He was like that. He said the important thing. Then he moved on. As if kindness were a nail he needed to drive in only once. On the 10th day, she found her mother's sewing box in the bottom of one of the packs. She had forgotten it was there. She sat down beside the fire with it. She opened the lid. Threads. Needles. A folded piece of blue calico. A pair of small silver scissors that had been Ruth's own mother's. And under all of it, a linen handkerchief. Half finished. Ruth had been embroidering a wild rose in one corner. She had gotten as far as the stem. And 2 leaves. And the beginning of the petals. The needle was still threaded. In pink cotton. Hannah lifted it out. Her hands went strange. As if they were not attached to her arms. She smoothed the linen across her knee. The stem was crooked. Ruth's hands had been shaking by the end. Hannah could see it now. She could see it in every uneven stitch. In the way the petals had begun to lean. Mama was dying while she made this. And she was making it anyway. Hannah picked up the needle. She did not know if she remembered how to embroider a rose. She tried anyway. The first petal was crooked. She tore it out. She started again. The second was better. The third, better still. She sewed for 2 hours that night. She did not speak. Wyatt did not speak either. He worked at the far side of the fire on a rawhide strap. Every so often he looked up. He did not ask what she was doing. He did not have to. He knew. On the 12th day, someone climbed the mountain. Hannah heard the footsteps before Wyatt did, because Wyatt was outside, hauling water from the stream. And Hannah was inside, alone, sewing. Footsteps. On the trail below the cave. Small footsteps. Not a man's. Hannah stood up. She reached for the rifle, because that was the rule now. Any sound outside, the rifle came first. She went to the door. She put her ear against it. A voice. Old. Out of breath. Female. Hannah. Hannah, child. It is Mercy Callahan. I am too old for this mountain, and I need to sit down before I die. Hannah dropped the rifle against the wall. She lifted the bar. She pulled the door open. Mercy Callahan stood there. Small, red-faced, 50 years old, and looking every day of it. Her gray hair had come loose from its bun. Her apron was tied over a heavy wool coat. Her boots were caked with wet snow up to the ankles. She was holding 2 woven baskets and a walking stick, and she was breathing like a woman who had just fought a bear. She said, "You picked a fine place to live, child." Hannah began to laugh. It was not the small surprised laugh from before. This one came up out of her chest hole. Loud. Almost breaking into a sob at the end. She had to grab the doorframe to steady herself. Mercy stepped inside. She sat down on Hannah's stool without asking. She put her hand on her chest. She said, "God is my witness. I have not walked that far since my wedding day, and even then it was downhill." Hannah closed the door. She knelt in front of Mercy. She took her hands. They were cold and rough and covered in flour. She said, "You came." Mercy said, "Of course I came." Hannah said, "You climbed 600 meters." Mercy said, "I climbed exactly as many meters as I had to. Now, where is the fire? And where is the tea? And who is that young man out there staring at us through the doorway like he has never seen a bakery woman before?" Wyatt Holloway had come back with the water bucket. He was standing at the entrance, frozen, his face doing the thing it did when it did not know what to do, which was nothing at all. Mercy looked him up and down. She said, You are Ezra Merritt's Blackfeet boy. The one he saved, Wyatt said. Yes, ma'am, Mercy said. He talked about you. Once. Years ago. He said you were the best young shot in these mountains. Wyatt said. He was kind, ma'am. Mercy said. He was honest. It is a different thing. Now bring me my basket, and let me look at you properly. I have not been up close to a young man in 10 years, and I intend to enjoy it. Wyatt looked at Hannah. Hannah nodded once. Small. She was trying not to smile. Wyatt brought the basket. Mercy took his hand as she pulled him closer. She looked into his face. She looked at the scar. She said, Bear. Wyatt said, Yes, ma'am. Mercy said, How old were you? 12. You lived. Yes, ma'am. She let go of his hand. She said, Good. That was all. But Wyatt seemed to breathe easier after it, as if a woman his own mother's age had just looked at him and named him a man worth living. He sat down. Not far. Not close. He sat exactly where a well-raised guest sits. Hannah watched him. And she felt, for the first time in a very long time, a small ache that was not grief. It was something else. She did not have a name for it yet. She looked away. She said, Mercy, what is in the baskets? Mercy had brought flour, salt, sugar, 2 jars of preserves, a wheel of hard cheese, a packet of coffee, 3 tins of condensed milk, a brick of tobacco. Not for Hannah, she had said, for the young man, if he choose. If not, it will trade for something else in the spring. She had brought a knitted shawl, a pair of thick wool stockings, a pound of dried apples in a cloth bag, and she had brought a letter. She pulled it out last, from an inside pocket of her coat, folded small, sealed with candle wax. The wax was old. The paper was yellowed at the edges. She held it out to Hannah. She said, Child, I have been carrying this letter for 6 weeks. Your mother wrote it the morning she died. She sent for me at dawn. I went to the house. She was sitting up in bed. She was very tired. She gave me this. She said, If anything happens to me, you give this to Hannah. Hannah stared at the letter. Her hands did not move. Mercy said, gentle, I know, child. Hannah's fingers finally lifted. She took the letter. Ruth Merritt's handwriting was on the front. Hannah. Just her name. Just that. Hannah did not open it right away. She could not. She held it in her hands for a long minute. And then she stood up, and she walked to the back of the cave, where the light was dim, and where no one could see her face. Mercy did not follow. Wyatt did not follow. They both understood. Hannah broke the wax seal with her thumbnail. She unfolded the paper. Her mother's writing was neat, careful, a little tremor at the beginning of each word, but strong. Hannah, my daughter, if Mercy is giving you this, then my heart has finally gone, and I did not have the strength to tell you what I have known for 2 months. I have known, my girl. I have known since October. I found a foxglove leaf in one of Silas Thorne's packets. I did not go to the sheriff, because your father tried already, and no one listened. I did not go to Doc Winters, because he is a good man, but he is a small man, and he is afraid of Silas Thorne. I did not tell you, because I did not want your last months with me to be months of grief and rage. I wanted them to be ordinary. I wanted you to remember me sweeping the floor, not screaming at the county courthouse. Forgive me for that, my girl. Forgive me for choosing silence. It was the only gift I knew how to give you. Hannah's hands were shaking. She had to hold the paper against her chest for a moment, because the letters were beginning to swim. She kept reading. I want you to hear me clearly now, Hannah, because I will not have another chance. Do not let this ruin you. Do not let Silas Thorne take my death and turn it into your poison. He has already had my body. Do not give him my daughter too. You are going to want to hate him. That is right and human. Hate him for a while. Let it burn. But do not build your house on that fire. It will not warm you. It will only eat you. Forgiveness is not for him. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. So you can put down the weight. So you can walk lighter through the rest of your years. So the man who took me does not also take the rest of your life. Do you understand me, Hannah? Do you hear me? You do not owe him grace, but you owe yourself peace. One more thing. Whatever comes next, whatever you build, whoever you love, wherever you go, do it as the daughter I raised. Not as a woman he made. If you can hold to that, you will win. And it will not look like winning. It will look like a small kitchen, and clean laundry on the line, and a child laughing in another room. That is what winning looks like, my girl. That is what your father and I always wanted for you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Mama. The letter ended there. 3 times. I love you. As if she had been afraid one time would not be enough. As if she had wanted to make sure Hannah heard it. Hannah stood at the back of the cave for a long time. She did not cry. She was past that kind of crying. The letter was too big for tears. Tears were for smaller griefs. She read the letter again. And a 3rd time. Then she folded it. Very carefully. Along the same folds her mother had made. She walked back to the fire. Mercy and Wyatt were talking quietly. Mercy was pouring tea from Hannah's kettle. Wyatt was holding a piece of dried apple between 2 fingers, as though he did not know whether he was allowed to eat it. They both looked up when Hannah came into the light. Hannah said, "She knew." Mercy nodded. Slowly. Mercy said, "She knew." Hannah said, "For 2 months." Mercy said, "She wanted your last weeks with her to be ordinary." "That is what she told me when I asked her the same question." Hannah sat down on the blanket by the fire. She said, "I do not know if that was brave or foolish." Mercy said, "It was both, child. Most brave things are." Hannah put the letter into the inside pocket of her father's coat, where the leather book already lived, where the pressed wildflower lived, where everything her parents had left her lived now. Her father's coat had become a small museum. She had become its curator. She did not know if she was ready for that job. But there was no one else. Mercy stayed 3 days. She had told Hannah she could not stay long, because the bakery could not be closed longer than that without questions, because Silas Thorne watched the bakery, because Mercy had spun a story that she was going to visit her sister in Deer Lodge, which was a lie, because Mercy did not have a sister in Deer Lodge, because Mercy did not have a sister at all. But 3 days was enough. Enough for Mercy to teach Hannah how to make her own sourdough starter from wild yeast and warm water. Enough for Hannah to sew Mercy a new apron with the blue calico from Ruth's sewing box. Enough for Mercy to look at Wyatt across the fire and say, without warning, "You have your mother's mouth, boy. Did anyone ever tell you that?" Wyatt had gone quiet. He had said, "No, ma'am. Nobody told me anything about my mother's face after she died." Mercy had said, "Then it is time somebody did. You have her mouth." And her hands. I sold her flour once a week for 11 years. Her hands were beautiful. Yours are the same. Wyatt had looked at his hands. He had not spoken again for an hour. But when he left that evening, he stopped at the doorway. He turned back. he said. Mrs. Callahan. Mercy said. Yes. He said. Thank you. Mercy said. For what? He said. For remembering her. Then he stepped out into the snow. Mercy watched him go. She said, without turning to Hannah, that boy is going to make some woman very glad someday. Hannah did not answer. She was busy stirring the pot. She was busy not answering. Before Mercy left on the third morning, she sat Hannah down on the stool. She took Hannah's hands. She said, I need to tell you what is happening in Red Willow, because you need to know. Hannah said, Tell me. Mercy said, Silas Thorne has moved into your father's cabin. Hannah closed her eyes. Mercy said, He has torn out your mother's garden. He is having men dig trenches in the back field. He says he is preparing for spring, but there is no spring planting done in November. Hannah said, He is looking for the vein of gold. Mercy said, He is. He has surveyors coming up from Missoula in the spring. He is telling people he means to sell the town on a mining venture. He wants Red Willow to think it is going to get rich. Hannah said, It will not get rich. Mercy said, It never does. Boomtowns eat the people who live in them. But that is not the news. Hannah said, What is the news? Mercy said, The news is Ida Whitaker. Hannah opened her eyes. Mercy said, You remember Ida. Widow. 2 little girls. Her husband worked the copper mine before he broke his back on that beam in '85. She has been trying to keep her girls fed on nothing. She goes to Thorne's store for medicine. Her youngest, Rose, has a bad cough this winter. Hannah said, Yes. Mercy said, 2 weeks ago, Thorne threw Ida out of the store because she was $2 short on the medicine. Right in front of the whole town, he told her to bring the $2 or watch her child die. Hannah said, God in heaven. Mercy said, And Ida, God bless her, Ida did not go home crying. Ida went home, and she got a certain book. Hannah looked up. Mercy said, The church tax book. She has been the church clerk for 8 years. She keeps that book. And in that book, child, is written every payment your father made. Every land tax. Every fee. He owed nothing. Not 1 cent. Not in the spring of '89. Not ever. Hannah's breath caught. Mercy said, Ida is keeping the book hidden. She is not stupid. She knows what Thorne would do if he learned. But she is a woman who has decided. Do you understand? She has decided. Hannah said, Decided what? Mercy said, Decided that she is done being afraid. She has been quietly talking to a few of us. Reverend Halstead, Doc Winters, Old Man Buckley at the livery. She is building something small. She does not have a name for it yet. Neither do I. But it is a thing. It is a thing that could become a fire. Hannah said, A fire. Mercy said, The kind that burns a town clean, child. The kind that comes after a long winter of everybody pretending it is still summer. Hannah looked into the flames of the small hearth. She said, What do I do? Mercy said, You stay alive. You keep this mountain. When the time comes, we will send for you. Or we will come for you. Or the winter will bring us together some way we do not see yet. God will handle the timing. He always does. He is just very slow about it. Hannah nodded. She said, Mercy. Mercy said, Yes, child. Hannah said, Why did you kneel in the street that day when you gave me the bread? Mercy was quiet a long moment. Then she said, Because I could not stand up in that town any more, child. Somebody had to kneel. And it was going to be me. Or nobody. Hannah pressed her forehead against the older woman's shoulder. Mercy put her hand on the back of Hannah's head, as Ruth had done 1,000 nights. As mothers do, as women do for each other when the mothers are gone. They stayed like that for a while. Then Mercy said, "All right, I need to walk back down before dark, because if I fall off this mountain, my ghost will haunt whoever finds me for being too heavy to carry." Hannah laughed. It was a real one. Full, whole, from the belly. After Mercy left, the mountain was quiet again. But it was a different quiet. It was the quiet of a house that had been visited. Hannah could still smell Merce's soap on the blanket she had slept in. She could still see the shape of Merce's boot in the corner where she had left it drying. She could still hear, in her head, the older woman's laugh, dry and low, and always a little late, as though Mercy did not laugh until she was sure it was safe. The mountain was less lonely for having been visited, but it was also more lonely because the visit was over. That was the way of things. Hannah understood. She kept working. Why it was different after that, Hannah could not exactly say how. He worked the same. He came at the same hour. He ate the same portions. But he looked at her a moment longer sometimes. Across the fire. When he thought she was reading, he said her name a little differently, as if he had begun to hear it as its own word. Not just as a way to address her. Hannah. Instead of Miss Hannah, which is what he had started with. Instead of ma'am, which he had used for the first week. Just Hannah. And she was aware of it. In the way a woman is always aware of these things. In the way her mother had told her, once, when she was 15, and had come home talking about a boy in the choir. Ruth had said, "A woman knows, Hannah, long before a man knows. That is how God made it. So we would have the time to think about it properly, while the men are still standing around looking confused." Hannah had laughed then. She had not understood what her mother meant. She was beginning to understand now. She said nothing about it. She would not have known what to say. And there was too much else to do. There was a mountain to keep alive, a winter to survive, a town below that might come for them any day. But she noticed. And she stitched more carefully at the linen handkerchief in her lap in the evenings than she had ever stitched at anything in her life. Then came the night of the small argument. It was the 22nd day. Hannah had begun sneaking down to the cedar ridge in the afternoons, to look at the trail, to see if she could see the town, to see if anyone was coming. Wyatt caught her at it on the 5th day of doing it. He came up behind her on the ridge, silent as a cat. She had not heard him at all. He said, "You should not be here." She jumped. She said, "God Almighty, Wyatt, announce yourself." He said, "The trail is exposed. Anyone with field glasses in the valley could see you standing here." She said, "Nobody in Red Willow has field glasses." He said, "Silas Thorne has field glasses." She said, "Oh." He said, "Come back to the cave." She said, "I want to see." He said, "See what?" She said, "The town. I want to remember what it looks like, from a distance. I want to remember I have not always lived on a mountain." His face softened. She could see him swallow whatever he had been about to say. He came and stood beside her, about a foot away. Not closer. They looked down at Red Willow together. The town was small from up here. Small and tucked into its valley. The church steeple. The 2 rows of buildings. The river. The smoke from a dozen chimneys. Wyatt said, "It is prettier from up here." Hannah said, "Everything is." Wyatt said, "I do not think everything is." Hannah looked at him. He did not look at her. He was looking at the town. he said. Some things are ugly at every distance. Hannah understood. She said, Silas Thorne. He said, Silas Thorne. They stood there a moment longer. Then Hannah said, I want to go down there. One time. Before the storm comes. I need to see Ida Whittaker. I need to see the tax book with my own eyes. Wyatt said, No. Hannah said, Wyatt. Wyatt said, Hannah. No. Hannah said, It is not for you to say. Wyatt was quiet. Then he said, You are right. It is not. He said, But if you go down that mountain, you will not go alone. Because if something happens to you on that trail or in that town, and I stayed up here, I do not know how I would live with that. I do not know what kind of man I would be after. And I have spent 23 years trying to figure out what kind of man I am. I do not want to start over. Hannah stared at him. He was still looking at the town. He said the whole speech to the town. Not to her, because he could not have said it to her face. Hannah felt her own eyes go hot. She said, Then we go together. He said, When? She said, Tomorrow night. Half moon. Enough to see by. Not enough to be seen by. He said, All right. He said, Hannah. She said, What? He said, If we go, we do not stop. We see Ida. We take what she has. We come home. We do not speak to anyone else. We do not go near your father's cabin. We do not go near Thorne's store. She said, I understand. He said, Home by dawn. She said, Home by dawn. Then he said the thing that stopped her heart. He said, Home. It is the first time I have called this place home. He turned around. He walked back up the ridge to the cave. Hannah stood there another long minute, watching the town below, feeling something very quiet begin to happen inside her chest. They went down the next night. Half moon, bright enough to see the trail, dim enough that a rider on horseback would not see them from more than 100 yards away. They went in silence. Wyatt in front, Hannah behind, Solomon left at the cave. Wyatt's own horse, Wren, left tied at a hidden hollow halfway down. The trail took 4 hours. Hannah's father's coat kept her warm. Her mother's Bible was in the pocket. Her father's rifle was slung over her back. She did not know if she would use it. She hoped she would not have to. Red Willow at midnight was not the town she remembered. It was smaller. Somehow. As if in 6 weeks, all the buildings had shrunk. Or as if she had grown. She was not sure which. They came in from the north road. Behind the church. Behind Ida Whittaker's house. Wyatt tapped the back window 3 times. A lamp inside moved. The window opened. Ida Whittaker's face appeared. She was 38 years old and looked 48. Her hair was gray at the temples. Her eyes were tired. She saw Hannah. Her hand went to her mouth. She said, "Oh, sweet Lord. Child, come in. Come in." The house was warm and smelled of camphor. Because of Rose, the youngest daughter, whose cough was still bad. Rose was asleep in the next room. Her older sister Ellen was sleeping beside her. Ida had a small fire going. She had been up sewing by lamplight when she heard the tap. She poured them tea, because that was what Red Willow women did, even at midnight, even for fugitives. She did not sit down herself. She stood by the fire. She did not want to sit. She was too full of things to say. She said, "You are alive." Hannah said, "I am." Ida said, "He said you were dead." Hannah said, "Who?" Ida said, "Silas Thorne. 2 weeks ago." In the store. Openly. He said you had died on the mountain in the first snow. He was smiling when he said it. Hannah said, "You have plenty of courage, Ida." Ida looked at her. Ida said, "I have some. I am gathering more." Then Ida went to the mantel. She reached behind the clock. She pulled out a folded oilcloth. She said, "Here. The tax book. Every payment your father made for 15 years. He owed nothing. Not $1. Not 1 cent. I have kept it for you since October, when I started to understand what was happening." Hannah took the oilcloth. She could not speak for a moment. She said, "Ida, if Thorne finds out you have this." Ida said, "He will not find out." Hannah said, "What if?" Ida said, "Hannah, look at me." Hannah looked. Ida said, "My youngest is 6 years old. She has a cough that will not leave her. 2 weeks ago, that man told me to my face that if I could not pay him $2, he did not care if she died. He said it in front of Reverend Halstead. He said it in front of my Rose." Ida's voice did not shake, but her hands did. She said, "So he can find out whatever he likes. I have done my share of being afraid. It is somebody else's turn." Hannah put the oilcloth into her coat. She said, "Ida?" Ida said, "What?" Hannah said, "You are not alone." Ida said, "I know." Hannah said, "The storm will bring us together. Somehow. I do not know how. But it will." Ida said, "I have been praying for that, child." Every night since October. They embraced. Once. Quick. Because time was short. Then Hannah and Wyatt slipped back into the alley. They did not go home the fast way. They went past the general store. Not close. Just close enough. Because Hannah had wanted to see it. Wyatt did not argue. The store was dark, but the saloon 2 doors down was still open. Yellow light in the windows. 2 horses tied outside. Hannah and Wyatt crouched in the shadow of the church. The saloon door opened. 2 men came out. Onto the boardwalk. They stopped to light cigars. Both men wore the long coats of Thorne's hired hands. The taller one said, "So when does the boss want us up there?" The shorter one said, "Next Tuesday. He wants a crew of 6. Picks. Shovels. Blasting powder if we can get it from Missoula in time." The taller one said, "The girl." The shorter one laughed. "Short. Ugly," he said. "The boss says she's already dead. First snow got her, he says." The taller one said, "And if she isn't?" The shorter one said, "Then we make sure she is. He is not paying us to leave loose ends." They laughed together. They mounted their horses. They rode away. Hannah did not breathe for a full 10 seconds. Wyatt's hand had gone to her arm. Above the elbow. "Firm," he said quietly. "Home. Now," she said. "Yes." They ran. They made it back to the cave at 4 in the morning. The sky was beginning to gray at the eastern edge. The first birds of the false dawn were starting to call in the pines. Hannah barred the door. She turned around. Wyatt was standing in the middle of the cave. His face was set. His jaw tight. He was breathing like a man who had been holding his breath the whole climb. He said, "Hannah." She said, "I know." He said, "They are going to come." She said, "I know." He said, "For the mountain. For the gold. For you." She said, "I know." She sat down on the blanket. She put her hands on her knees. She said, "Wyatt, I want to tell you something." He said, "Yes." She said, "I am not going to kill him." Wyatt was still. she said. When he comes, I am not going to kill him. Not with the rifle. Not with a fall. Not any way. Because if I kill him, my mother's letter will have been for nothing. Because if I kill him, I become the thing he made me. Because if I kill him, then everything he did to my mother wins. Do you understand? Wyatt said. I understand. She said. So, if it comes to it, if the moment comes, I need you to know. I am not going to. Wyatt said. All right. She said. And I need you not to either. He was quiet. She said. Quiet. He said. That is a harder promise. She said. I know it is. He said. I will try, Hannah. She said. That is all I ask. He said. I will try. Then he did something he had never done before. He crossed the cave. He sat down beside her. Not close enough to touch, but closer than he had ever sat. He said, Do you know why I never left this valley, Hannah? She said, No. He said, Because I had nothing worth leaving for, and nothing worth staying for. Just a cabin, and a trap line, and a mountain that did not know my name. He said, That has changed. He did not look at her. He said it to the fire, the way he had said the other thing. On the ridge. Hannah did not say anything. She could not. She put her hand, very lightly, on the blanket between them. He did not take her hand, but he moved his own hand, so that his fingers rested against the edge of hers. Just barely. The kind of touching two people do when they are not ready to touch, but cannot bear not to. They sat like that until the sun came up. They slept a few hours. Then they woke. They began to prepare. Wyatt fashioned a second bar for the door. Iron this time. He had made it in his own forge at the cabin the week before, but he had not installed it yet. He installed it now. Hannah rehearsed the map of the cave in her head. The lower vent. The upper vent. The place where the papers were hidden. She drew a new hiding place. Deeper in the wall. Behind two stones that looked, to a casual eye, like all the other stones. She moved the deed, and the letter, and the tax book into the new hiding place. She kept only the leather book of her father's in the pocket of the coat. She sharpened the axe. She loaded the rifle. She counted the cornmeal. She counted the salt. She counted the days. Because the wind had shifted that morning. It was coming down from the north now. Sharp. Steady. The kind of wind that starts a week of weather. The birds had left the cedar ridge the day before. She had not said anything. Wyatt had not said anything. Both of them had noticed. On the sixth morning, after the trip to town, the sky changed. Hannah stepped out at dawn to break the ice on the water bucket. She looked up. The clouds had come. Then at first, stretched across the whole valley like scratched metal. Then, by mid-morning, thicker, lower, gray on gray on gray. Solomon stood in his stall inside the cave. His head turned to the south. His ears fixed. He was very still. Wren, tied outside near the door, kept lifting his tail and pawing at the ground. Wyatt came out of the cave with an armful of firewood. He looked at Wren. He looked at the sky. He said, Hannah. She said, I see it. He said, tomorrow. Maybe tonight. She said, how bad? He said, bad. This one is going to be bad. He said, Hannah, if it is what I think it is, the town is not going to survive it. Not the outlying houses. Not the poorly built roofs. Not the ones without wood stacked. They will lose people. She said, yes. He said, you know what that means. She said, yes. She was already looking down the mountain, toward the valley, toward Red Willow, toward the two men on horseback who had laughed about killing her. Toward Silas Thorne. She said, "They will come." Wyatt said, "They will come." She said, "All of them." He said, "All of them." She said, "And I will have to open the door." Wyatt looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "You are the strangest woman I have ever known, Hannah Merritt." She said, "How?" He said, "Because most people would count that a curse, that the whole town is going to come to your door." He said, "And you are already thinking of it, as if it is your job to answer." Hannah did not answer. Because he was right. Because she was already thinking of it that way. Because her mother's letter was in her coat. Because her father had built this mountain for exactly this. Because it was a job. Because she was the only one on the mountain who could do it. She said quietly, "Let's get everything ready." Wyatt said, "Yes." They went to work. By nightfall, the first true flakes were coming down. Small, steady, endless. Hannah stood in the doorway. Behind her, the fire burned low against the warm channel. Solomon dozed in his stall. Wren was in the sheltered lee beside the outer door. The cave was warm. The mountain was breathing. Below, in the valley, she could see the yellow windows of Red Willow going out one by one, as the storm thickened between her and the town. Somewhere in one of those houses, Mercy Callahan was already putting on her heaviest coat. She did not know it yet. But she would. Somewhere in one of those houses, Ida Whitaker was carrying a coughing child to a warmer wall. Somewhere in one of those houses, Sheriff Elias Ward was staring into a whiskey glass and feeling the weight of a resignation letter in his coat pocket, and not knowing whether the storm was going to give him the chance to use it, or whether it was going to bury him. Somewhere in one of those houses, Silas Thorne was sitting by a large fire in a stolen cabin, drinking imported brandy, looking at a rough surveyor's map of Ironhorn Mountain. And he was smiling, because he believed the girl on the mountain was dead. And he believed the storm was a gift. He did not know that the storm was going to walk his whole town up the mountain to Hannah Merritt's door. He did not know that she was going to open the door anyway. He did not know a lot of things, but he was going to learn. Hannah closed the cave door. She barred it. She turned to Wyatt. She said, "Let's cook something hot. It might be the last quiet meal we have for a while." Wyatt said, "Yes." She said, "And Wyatt?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Thank you for staying." He looked up from the kettle. He said, "Hannah, I was never going anywhere." She said, "I know." She said, "I just needed to say it." Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, the fire crackled softly. The storm was here. The storm came in 3 waves. The first wave was wind. It arrived at midnight and did not stop for 6 hours. It bent the pines outside like they were praying. It pushed against the cave door with the steady weight of a large animal leaning on wood. The second wave was snow. It came at dawn, sideways at first, then straight down, then sideways again. By noon of the first day, Hannah could not see her own hand at arm's length outside the cave mouth. The third wave was silence, the strangest of the 3. At around 3 in the afternoon of the first day, the wind simply stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Hannah was inside, kneeling beside the warm channel, adjusting a stone. Wyatt was near the door, listening. He said, "Something is wrong." She said, "Nothing is wrong. It stopped." He said, "That is what is wrong." Because a Montana storm does not stop halfway. Not this kind. Not one that arrives in November with the smell of the Arctic on it. A pause in the middle of that kind of storm meant only one thing. The storm was gathering itself for something worse. Wyatt said, "Anna, get the extra bar for the door." Hannah got up. She got the bar. Then they heard it. Voices. Below the ridge. Coming up. Not one. Not two. Many. Hannah went to the cave door. She pressed her ear against the wood. She could hear boots and packed snow. Horses breathing hard. A child crying, high and thin, the kind of cry that means the child has been crying for a long time and is nearly out of sound. Then a man's voice. Cracked. Exhausted. Terrified. Sheriff Elias Ward. "Hannah! Hannah, girl, please! Please! Please!" She had never in her life heard a man beg like that. Wyatt lifted the rifle. Hannah put her hand on his forearm. She said, "Not yet." She turned to the door. She said, in a voice she did not entirely recognize as her own, "Sheriff, who is with you?" There was a long pause, as if he had not expected her to answer. Then his voice again, broken. 12 of us. Women. Children. 2 men from the store. Mercy Callahan. Ida Whitaker and her girls. Reverend Halstead. Doc Winters. And... He hesitated. And Silas Thorne. Hannah closed her eyes. She had known. She had known even before she came to the door. Behind her, Wyatt did not move. He said quietly, "Hannah," she said. "I know," she said. "Sheriff, tell me about Merce's grandson." There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, broken and small. "Mercy." "Toby is with me, child. He is my son's boy. His mother sent him to me for the winter. His feet are gone. He does not feel them. I am carrying him. Hannah, please." Hannah's forehead was pressed against the door. She said, "How long has it been?" Mercy said, 2 hours since he stopped feeling. Maybe more. I lost count. Hannah opened her eyes. She turned to Wyatt. She said, "We are going to open it." Wyatt said, "I know." She said, "Rules first." Wyatt said, "Yes." She lifted her voice. "Sheriff, listen carefully. Every rifle, every pistol, every knife longer than a butter blade, goes into the snow, 10 feet from the door. Before any of you enter, anyone who breaks that rule goes back out into the storm, and I will not open again." Sheriff Ward said, "Yes." She said, "Silas Thorne, are you listening?" A pause. Then his voice, steady, cold, the voice of a man who knew he had already lost the first round. "I am listening, Miss Merritt," she said. "Your revolver, your derringer, whatever else, 10 feet from the door, and I will know if you keep so much as a penknife. My man out here can smell iron in a coat pocket." She looked at Wyatt as she said it. Wyatt's face did not move, but she saw the corner of his mouth lift. Just once, just briefly, because he loved that she had called him her man. Thorne said, "As you say, Miss Merritt." Hannah listened. She heard the small metallic sounds of guns hitting snow. One after another. A dozen small clinks. Then Wyatt said, "Enough. Open." Hannah lifted the bar. She pulled the door open. The wind, which had paused, chose that moment to come back. It threw the door inward. It threw snow across the cave floor. It threw a woman across the threshold, Mercy Callahan, arms full of an 8-year-old boy whose face was blue. Wyatt caught them both. He set the boy down on the raised bed near the warm channel, with the practiced hands of a man who had thawed frozen fawns and elk calves his whole life. He said to Mercy, "Not close to the fire. Not yet. Slow. Slow." Then he stepped back to guard the door. The others came in. One by one. Ida Whittaker with a girl in each hand. Rose, the 6-year-old, coughing wetly into her mother's coat. Ellen, the 9-year-old, silent and huge-eyed. Reverend Halstead, 65, ice-beard, carrying a woman on his back, Mrs. Thibault, whose husband ran the livery, whose ankle had turned on the trail an hour ago. Doc Winters, 8 bottles of medicine in a leather satchel. His spectacles fogged solid, steam curling off his coat. 2 of Thorne's hired men. Their names were Carl and Boyd. They had been the 2 men laughing on the boardwalk. They did not look like they were laughing now. Their beards were rimed with ice. One of them had lost a glove somewhere on the trail. His hand was gray. Ida Whittaker's cousin, Beulah, a young mother, 22, with an infant wrapped tight against her breast beneath 2 coats. And then Sheriff Elias Ward. He came in last but one. His hat was gone. He looked older than she remembered him, as if he had aged 10 years in 6 weeks. His face was drawn. His mouth had a new tightness to it. He would not look at Hannah as he passed her. He said only, "God bless you, girl." He shuffled to the far wall. And then, last, Silas Thorne. He walked in, with the dignity of a man walking into a bank he owned. His coat was buttoned. His silver watch chain caught the firelight. His face was calm. He removed his hat as he crossed the threshold. He said, "Miss Merritt." Hannah did not answer him. She closed the door. She dropped the bar. She dropped the iron bar behind it. 2 layers of iron. Between the cave and the world. She turned around. The cave was full. Full of the people of Red Willow. Full of the town that had watched her leave. Full of the man who had killed her mother. She said, "Rules." Everyone looked at her. She said, "The lower vent stays open. Anyone who blocks it, even by accident, we all die. We share food equally. Every meal. Every day. No one takes an extra bite. No one hoards. No fires except this one. No lanterns except mine and Wyatt's." She said, "You will sleep where I show you. You will use the sanitary trench Wyatt digs in the outer chamber. You will drink water only from the kettle. You will not go near the back wall. You will not touch anything you did not bring in with you." She said, "Anyone who cannot follow these rules, I open the door, and I put you back in the storm. I do not care if you are 2. I do not care if you are 80. There will be no exceptions." Silence. Then Reverend Halstead said, "Miss Merritt." She said, "Yes, Reverend." He said, "We are in your house, and we are in your debt, and we will do exactly as you say. God bless you." Hannah looked at the old man. He was standing straighter than a man his age had any right to. She said, "Thank you, Reverend." Silas Thorne from the back wall said, "That is very Christian of you, Miss Merritt." Hannah did not look at him. She said, "The rules apply to you too, Mr. Thorne, and I am not being Christian." She turned to the boy on the bed. She said, "Now, let me look at his feet." Toby Callahan was 8 years old. Small for 8. Skinny. Round-faced. Freckles across the bridge of a very cold, very blue nose. Hannah knelt beside him. She said, "Toby, my name is Hannah. Do you remember me?" Toby's eyes moved. Slowly. He said, "My grandma said you make bread." Hannah said, "Your grandma is a liar. Your grandma is the one who makes bread. I am the one who eats it." Toby smiled. "Just barely." Then he said, I can't feel my feet. Hannah said. I know. We are going to fix that. It will hurt when we do. Are you brave? Toby said. I try to be. Hannah said. Trying is the same thing as being. Wyatt, hand me the small kettle and the flannel cloth in the third pack. Wyatt handed them. Hannah heated water to lukewarm. Not hot. Never hot for frozen feet. That was one of the first things her mother had taught her when she was 10. When Papa had come in from a bad hunt with hands that would not close. She wrapped Toby's feet in the flannel. She poured lukewarm water over the flannel. She let it soak in slowly. She did not touch his feet directly. She let the water do it. Toby said, It hurts. Hannah said, Good. It should. That means the blood is coming back. She said, Toby, tell me about your dog. Toby said, How do you know I have a dog? Hannah said, Every 8-year-old boy has a dog. Toby said, His name is Biscuit. Hannah said, Biscuit is an excellent name. Toby said, He is old. Hannah said, So am I. Toby laughed. He laughed at the exact moment feeling returned to his big toe. He cried out. His whole small body seized. Mercy grabbed his hand. Hannah did not stop the water. She said, Keep laughing, Toby. Keep laughing at me. This is going to hurt for another 20 minutes. Toby laughed and cried at the same time. Hannah kept working. She did not look up. But she heard the room around her go quiet. Because the room was watching. Because the room understood, in that moment, whose cave they were in. For the first night, everyone survived. Wyatt organized the sleeping arrangement. Women and children close to the warm channel. Men further out. He himself did not sleep. He sat by the door, with the rifle across his knees. Hannah, at the other end of the cave, did the same with hers. Ida Whitaker's daughter Rose coughed most of the night. Doc Winters mixed her a syrup from 3 of his bottles. The cough eased around 3 in the morning. Beulah's infant slept, at last, against her breast. Toby slept, with feeling back in both feet. Mercy Callahan sat awake by her grandson's head. She did not speak all night. But she looked, once, across the fire at Hannah. And she nodded. Slow. The nod said, You have done a thing tonight. You will remember it always. Hannah nodded back. Silas Thorne slept. Or seemed to. Hannah watched him, from her side of the cave. He lay on his back. His hands folded across his chest. His breathing steady. Hannah did not trust it. Because Silas Thorne had not become the richest man in the valley by sleeping, when there was work to be done. She watched him for the whole first night. She did not blink much. On the morning of the second day, Silas Thorne began to talk. Not to Hannah. He was too clever for that. He talked to the others. Quiet. Kind. Wounded. To Reverend Halstead, he said, I regret many things in my life, Reverend. Perhaps the storm is God's way of asking me to reckon with them. To Ida Whitaker, he said, How is little Rose? Please take some of my rations. I had a large breakfast before I left. To Sheriff Ward, he said, Elias, you have always been a good man. This will pass. We will all go home. Sheriff Ward did not answer him. Sheriff Ward, in fact, had not spoken a full sentence since he had entered the cave. He sat against the far wall, his hands on his knees, his eyes on the fire, and every so often his hand would move to the inside of his coat, as if to make sure something was still there. Hannah watched this. She said nothing. She had time. The storm outside doubled at midday. The wind came back with a fury that shook stones in the ceiling. Hannah heard cracks. Not in the mountain. In the pines below. Whole trees going down under the weight of snow. Wyatt said low. That is going to bury the trail. The town is going to lose houses today. Hannah said. Then we make sure this place holds. She checked the vents 4 times. She adjusted stones twice. She was not going to lose these people to bad air. Not after everything. That afternoon, she took the tea to Silas Thorne. She had heated water. She had brewed the tea Mercy had brought. Not the poison kind. Real tea. Black tea. From the tin. She poured a cup for every person in the cave. Then she filled one more. She walked to the back wall. She set the cup on the stone floor beside Silas Thorne's boot. She did not speak. She did not look at him. She turned around. She walked back to the fire. The cave was silent. Silas Thorne looked down at the cup. Then he looked up. At Hannah's back. He said, Miss Merritt. She did not turn. He said, Thank you. She still did not turn. She said over her shoulder, It is only tea, Mr. Thorne. It will not kill you. She sat down beside the fire. Wyatt looked at her across the flames. He did not smile, but his eyes were burning. He was so proud of her in that moment that he could not speak. Hannah understood without being told. She looked into the fire. She said softly only to him, I am not going to become him. Not even a little. Wyatt said softly only to her, I know. That night the man moved. Hannah had known he would. She had lain down at midnight in her usual spot near the door. She had closed her eyes. She had made her breathing slow and steady. She had not slept. Around 2 in the morning, she heard him. Silas Thorne rose from his blanket at the back of the cave. He moved like a much younger man. Quiet. Steady. He crossed the cave without waking anyone. He went to the back wall, where she had once hidden the papers. Before she had moved them, he put his hand on the stone she had once used. He pushed. The stone came loose. He reached into the hollow. His hand met nothing. He froze. He stood there, at the back wall, with his hand in an empty hole. Hannah watched him, from beneath her half-closed eyelids. She waited to see what he would do next. What he did next surprised even her. He turned around. He walked toward the lower vent. Slowly. Deliberately. Hannah's breath stopped. She sat up. She said sharp and clear, Do not. Silas Thorne froze. The whole cave began to wake. He turned to face her. He was smiling. Faintly. In the lantern light his face was long and narrow and calm. He said, Miss Merritt, I have no idea what you mean. She said, You were about to close the lower vent. He said, I was cold. She said, Then get another blanket. There is a stack in the corner. He said, The air near the vent is. She said, The air near the vent is what is keeping us alive. And you knew it. And you were going to close it. And you were going to blame the snow. By now, half the cave was sitting up. Sheriff Ward, Mercy, Reverend Halstead, the 2 hired men, Carl and Boyd, who had, both of them, sat up very fast. Silas Thorne said softly, You have a wonderful imagination, Miss Merritt. He walked back to his blanket. He lay down. He closed his eyes. Hannah did not lie back down. She sat up the rest of the night. Wyatt sat up with her. They did not speak, but she leaned her head, just once, against his shoulder. And she felt his hand come up, very briefly, and rest on the crown of her head, the way a father might, the way a friend might, the way something else might, when there was time later. She closed her eyes for only a moment. She kept watch. The next morning, Hannah found something. She had gone to Silas Thorne's blanket to inspect it. She had waited until he was at the water bucket. Inside the folded wool, at the far corner, tucked into a stitch he had unpicked and restitched from the inside, a small piece of oilcloth. She pulled it out. Inside, nothing. He had used it to carry something, and he had unwrapped it. Hannah looked around the cave, and she saw, on the ledge above the warm channel, a small pile of Wyatt's tools. A knife, a small brass compass, 2 spare hinges, and a folding saw. The folding saw was missing. She looked at Wyatt. Wyatt was already looking at the ledge. He said only, "Get the sheriff." Hannah said, "Sheriff Ward." Sheriff Ward stood up. Hannah said, "The saw is missing. So is Mr. Thorne." Sheriff Ward turned. He looked at the back of the cave. Silas Thorne's blanket was empty. The candle by the lower vent, the small one Hannah had placed there as a warning, was standing perfectly upright. The flame was straight up. No air was moving. Hannah said, "He has gone into the lower passage. He is trying to open the outer end. He is going to bury it behind him. He is going to leave us to suffocate. He is going to take the papers." She said, "Wyatt." Wyatt said, "I am with you." She said, "Sheriff." Sheriff Ward said, "I am with you too, Miss Merritt." They crawled into the lower passage on their bellies. Wyatt first, then Hannah, then Sheriff Ward. The passage was 5 feet wide at the entrance. It narrowed to 3 feet after 10 paces, then 2, then 1.5. Hannah's father had built it low on purpose. Low was harder to block from the outside. Low was harder to find. Low was also very hard to crawl through. Wyatt's lantern light bounced against the walls ahead. They found Thorne 20 feet in. He was buried to his chest. He had cut through the pine needle and brush plug on the outside end. He had reached the outer air. But when he had reached the outer air, the outer wall of packed snow, 3 feet of drift accumulated in a single day, had collapsed on him. He was pinned. He could not move his arms. He could not turn his head. In his coat, pressed against his chest by the snow, was Wyatt's folding saw, and the small oilcloth bundle Hannah had missed. The papers, the deed, the tax book, her mother's letter. He had found them, somehow, in the night, while she had been distracted. Somehow, his eyes rolled up. He saw them. He said, "Please." That was all. Please. The word came out of him like a small child's word. Not a merchant's word. Not a rich man's word. A person's word. Hannah stared at him. Behind her, Wyatt's lantern was dimming. She looked back. The lantern flame was struggling, because the air in this tight passage was being pulled toward the outer breach, and because the outer breach was clogging with fresh snow. The lower vent, above them, was not drawing correctly anymore. The cave, back where the 12 people slept, was starting to die. Hannah understood, with a clarity that felt almost calm, that she had 2 minutes, maybe 3. If she went back, if she left Silas Thorne to die in the tunnel, the outer breach would soon seal itself with the storm. The cave might survive. If she saved him, she had to open a new hole, fast, to reset the airflow. And if she opened a new hole, she saved him. She could not save the mountain without saving him. She looked at Sheriff Ward. She looked at Wyatt. Wyatt said low, "You said you were not going to become him." "This is what that means, Hannah." Hannah closed her eyes. "Only for 1 moment." She said, "Give me the rope. Give me the axe. Sheriff, you dig. Wyatt, you pull." Wyatt said, "Yes." Sheriff Ward said, "Yes." They went to work. Hannah dug at the snow around Silas Thorne with her hands, because she could not swing the axe in the tight space. Her fingers split at the nails. Blood, warm, ran down the sides of her palms. She did not notice. Sheriff Ward, at her side, dug with his own hands. He was crying. Not loud. Just quiet, running tears down a face that had not cried since he was a small boy. He kept saying, under his breath, "God forgive me. God forgive me. God forgive me." Hannah did not know if he was talking to God, or to Ruth Merritt, or to Ezra, or to himself. It did not matter. Wyatt was behind her, at the rope, pulling Silas Thorne slowly free. The snow gave up its hold, inch by inch. First his hands, then his shoulders, then his hips. The oilcloth packet fell out of his coat as he came loose. Hannah caught it in her bloody left hand. She jammed it into the pocket of her father's wool coat. Silas Thorne came free with one boot missing. His face was blue. He was still breathing. Wyatt said, "The vent! Hannah! Now!" Hannah crawled past Thorne, past Sheriff Ward, toward the outer breach. She swung the axe. Once, twice, 3 times. She widened the choke point. The snow gave way. Cold air rushed in, clean, cold, alive. The lantern behind her bloomed. Bright, bright. The air moved through the passage. She felt it on her face. The cave, back where the 12 people slept, took a breath. Hannah dropped the axe. She sank her forehead against the snow. She said out loud, "Mama, I did not become him." She stayed there a moment. Then she turned around. She crawled back. She helped Wyatt drag Silas Thorne to the main chamber. The cave woke up. Mercy cried out when she saw them come in. Reverend Halstead reached for the water bucket without needing to be told. Doc Winters was on his feet in seconds, medical bag open. Ida Whitaker took one look at Sheriff Ward's face, running with tears and snow and blood, and put a hand on his arm, and did not let go. Silas Thorne was laid down beside the warm channel. He was blue and slow and could not speak. Hannah handed the oilcloth packet to Sheriff Ward. She said, "Sheriff, you do not need to open this in front of him. You already know what is inside. But I want you to look at it. In front of all of us. Now!" Sheriff Ward's hands were shaking. He opened the oilcloth. He took out the deed. He read it aloud in a voice that broke twice. He took out the letter. Thorne's letter to Ezra Merritt, offering $600 for the mountain. The letter with a note in Thorne's own hand. If Merritt will not sell, there is always another way. He read that aloud too. The room was very still. He took out the third document. Ida Whitaker's tax book. 15 years of Ezra Merritt's payments. Not one debt. Not one missing dollar. Not one late fee. Ever. He read those aloud too. Ida Whitaker did not look up. She sat with her chin against the top of Rose's head. Sheriff Ward said, "There is one more paper." He reached inside his own coat. He pulled out a folded, worn document. It had been folded so many times the creases had begun to tear. He said, "I wrote this on the 3rd of September, 2 weeks before Ruth Merritt died. I wrote it, and I did not send it, because I was afraid of him." He unfolded it. He said, "It is my resignation as Sheriff of Red Willow, effective the day I signed it." He looked up. He looked at Silas Thorne, lying blue on the blanket. He said, "I knew Silas. About the tea. About the death slip. I knew. And I did nothing. Because I have 3 children and a wife and a mortgage on a boarding house. And you told me you owned me, and I believed you. He turned. He looked at Hannah. He said, Miss Merritt, I do not deserve to ask your forgiveness. But when this storm ends, I will walk down that mountain with these papers in my hand, and I will walk into the county courthouse in Missoula, and I will testify against him, and I will not stop testifying until the day he hangs or the day I do, whichever comes first. Hannah looked at him a long time. The whole room held its breath. Then Hannah did something no one expected. She crossed the cave. She knelt in front of Sheriff Ward. She took the resignation letter from his hands. She tore it once in half. She said, Stand up, Sheriff. There is a town down there that needs a decent man. Do not resign. Do not run. You have been a coward. Now be brave. That is a harder job. And you already know it. So do it. Sheriff Ward could not speak. He nodded. Once. He nodded once and looked at the floor. That was enough. That was more than enough. Silas Thorne recovered slowly. Doc Winters kept him alive with heated blankets and tinctures. By the second night, after the tunnel, he could sit up. By the third, he could speak. He did not try to escape again. There was nowhere to escape to. The storm went on. Sheriff Ward and Wyatt Holloway took turns keeping watch. His hands were tied at night. Loosely. Enough to sleep. Not enough to work a door. Hannah brought him water every morning. She did not speak to him. She set the cup down at his boot. She turned around. She walked back to the fire. On the fourth morning, he spoke to her. He said, Miss Merritt. She did not turn. He said, May I speak? She said, You may. I do not have to answer. He said, That is fair. He said, My father was a bookkeeper in St. Louis. He drank himself into an early grave. He left my mother and me $13. When I was 19, I promised my mother I would be rich. She died 2 months later. I never got to tell her I had made it. He said, I have been trying to keep a promise to a dead woman for 40 years. That is what the mountain was. Just one more attempt. Hannah stopped walking. She turned. She looked at him. She said, Mr. Thorne. He said, Yes. She said, That is not a story that softens me. That is only a story about a man who loved his mother badly. My mother loved me correctly. And you killed her. And your reasons are not my problem. He looked down. She said, But I will tell you a thing. Because I owe it to my mother to tell you. Not because I owe it to you. She said, You do not need the mountain. You do not need the gold. You do not need what you have been chasing. You have been cold your whole life, Mr. Thorne. Not from money. From something else. And no ridge on any mountain in Montana is going to warm that up. She said, Not every mountain is gold. Some just have people. She said, You should have tried to be one of the people. Silas Thorne looked at the floor. His face did not move. But 2 tears rolled down it. He did not wipe them. He said quietly, Thank you, Miss Merritt. She said, Do not thank me. I did not do it for you. She walked back to the fire. She sat down next to Wyatt. She was shaking. Wyatt did not touch her, but he put his coat around her shoulders. He said, You did well. She said, I know. She said, I am still shaking. He said, The strong ones always do. That is how you know they are strong. The storm broke on the 7th day. Hannah opened the cave door at dawn. The valley below was buried. Only the church steeple and the taller chimneys showed above the snow. Red Willow looked like a small white boneyard. Silent. The party started down at mid-morning. Wyatt led, with a rope, testing snow for drifts. Sheriff Ward walked behind him. Silas Thorne was on a lead rope, hands tied, walking on his own feet. Hannah walked in the middle, Solomon behind her, Mercy holding Toby's hand. Doc Winters had built a sled out of 2 of Hannah's boards and some rawhide. Mrs. Thibault, with her twisted ankle, rode on it. So did Rose, whose cough had eased, but who was very tired. Wren pulled the sled. Reverend Halstead brought up the rear, his hymnal in one hand, his other hand on Ellen Whitaker's shoulder. He was praying the whole way, not out loud, just moving his lips. They reached Red Willow at dusk. Half the roofs of the town had fallen in. Silas Thorne's store had lost its whole front wall. But the Merritt cabin, Ezra's careful cabin, the one he had built the year Hannah was born, still stood. Hannah walked up to her father's door. She pushed it open. The rooms inside had been stripped, but the walls still stood. She said, quietly, to no one but the cabin, "Hi, Papa. Hi, Mama." She did not cry. She had done all her crying on the mountain. The trial happened 2 weeks later, in the church at Red Willow, because the county courthouse in Missoula was still snowed out. The county judge came up in a sleigh from Deer Lodge. Sheriff Ward presented the evidence. Ida Whitaker presented the tax book. Mercy Callahan told the court what Ruth Merritt had said to her the morning she died. Doc Winters testified about the last of the Wednesday tea, which he had sent by Ryder to a chemist friend in Missoula the week after the funeral. The chemist's written statement was read aloud. It confirmed foxglove leaf, ground fine, mixed with black tea leaves. Silas Thorne did not defend himself. He sat with his hands folded. When the judge asked him for his statement, he only said, "I have no defense, Your Honor. Everything they have said is true." The judge sentenced him to prison in Deer Lodge for the rest of his life. He did not look at Hannah as they took him out of the church. She did not look at him either. But as he passed her, she said, quietly, "Peace be with you, Mr. Thorne." He stopped for 1 full second. Then he walked on. Hannah never saw him again. She did not think about him again more than once or twice a year, which was, she came to understand, the true shape of her mother's promise to her. Do not let him take the rest of your life. She did not let him. Spring came in Red Willow. Hannah moved back into her father's cabin. Mercy Callahan sold her bakery to a young couple from Butte and moved in with Hannah, because Mercy said her own house was too big for one old woman, and because Hannah said hers was too big for one young one, which was a small, dignified lie. Both of them knew it. Neither of them said so. They baked bread together every Sunday morning, the way Ruth Merritt had done. Ida Whitaker opened a small schoolhouse in the old vestry room of the church. Hannah came down from her afternoons of tending the garden to teach the youngest children their letters twice a week. Wyatt Holloway did not move down from the mountain. He kept his cabin at the western draw, but he came down to Red Willow every Wednesday, rain or shine, which everyone in the town noticed, because Wyatt Holloway had not set foot inside the town lines in 11 years. He came to the schoolhouse, where he sat at the back of the room with a slate and a piece of chalk. And Hannah taught him the last of his letters, and then whole words, and then sentences. He was reading his mother's name, Sky Bear Woman, in English lettering by the time the daffodils came up. He wept quietly at the back of the schoolroom. Ida Whitaker, teaching the older girls at the front of the room, did not turn around. She pretended not to see. She simply kept teaching. That was what Red Willow had begun to learn. That was what it was becoming, slowly, week by week. A town that pretended not to see the tears of a good man, because it had learned that seeing them and staring at them was not the same as respecting them. Sheriff Elias Ward went back to work. He was a different sheriff now. He walked the streets slowly. He talked to the merchants like a man asking questions, not like a man collecting them. He deputized 2 new men, one of them Wyatt Holloway, who did the job on Wednesdays, when he came down for his letters. The Blackfeet families in the outlying camps north of Red Willow began, tentatively, to come into town for supplies again. Because Deputy Holloway was often there. Because the sheriff had made it clear, in his own quiet way, that any Red Willow merchant who refused service to a Blackfeet family would find himself with no sheriff's protection at all when he needed it most. Which was a promise the sheriff kept once. And after he kept it once, he did not have to keep it again. Carl and Boyd both left the county before spring. No one missed them. At the end of April, Toby Callahan asked Hannah if he could go up the mountain. He said, "I want to see the door, Miss Hannah." Hannah said, "Which door?" Toby said, "The one my grandma said saved my life." Hannah did not answer right away. Then she said, "Yes, Toby. On Saturday. We will ride Solomon up. If your grandma says it is all right." Mercy said it was all right. They rode up on a bright warm Saturday. The trail was clear of snow. At the cave, Hannah swung the door open. Toby stepped inside. He said, "It is warm." Hannah said, "It is." He said, "How?" She said, "The mountain has hot water running under it. My papa found the way to move the warm air. Come, let me show you." She showed him. She showed him the clay channel, the upper vent, the lower vent, which she had rebuilt, larger this time, with a proper wooden hatch. She showed him the raised bed where he had once lain, with feet that could not feel. He put his hand on the bed. Very seriously. He said, "Miss Hannah, do you live here alone now?" She said, "No. I live down in the valley. Mercy and I." He said, "Then the mountain is empty." She said, "The mountain is not empty. The mountain is just quiet. That is a different thing." Toby nodded. Very solemnly. Then he said, "I want to leave something." She said, "All right." He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small carved bird. He had whittled it himself, over the winter, sitting by Merce's kitchen stove. A jay. Rough. Small enough to fit in his hand. He put it on the ledge above the warm channel. He said, "So the mountain knows me." Hannah said, "The mountain knew you already, Toby. The first night you came." Toby smiled. Then he said, "Can I come back?" Hannah said, "You can come back any time you like. Any child in Red Willow can. That is going to be the rule." Toby said, "That is a good rule." Hannah said, "Come on. Let's go home before your grandma worries." On the way down the trail, they passed Wyatt. He was coming up. He was carrying on his back a wooden sign. He had made it himself at his cabin over the winter. He set it down when he saw them. Hannah looked at it. The wood was cedar. Clean. Sanded smooth. Burned into the surface, in letters he had practiced 100 times in the schoolroom to get right. This mountain belongs to whoever needs a home. Keep the lower door open. For air. For hearts. For anyone. Hannah stood on the trail and looked at the sign a long time. Wyatt did not say anything. Toby said, "Miss Hannah is crying." Hannah said, "Miss Hannah is not crying, Toby." Toby said, "Miss Hannah is a little crying." Wyatt said, "Miss Hannah is welcome to cry whenever she wants." Hannah wiped her eyes with the back of her father's coat sleeve. She said, "Take it up, Wyatt. Nail it above the door." Wyatt said. You want to help me? Hannah said. Not this time. This time, I want you to do it. And I want to come up on Sunday and see it done. Wyatt said. Sunday. Hannah said. Sunday. Yes. He picked up the sign. She started down the mountain with Toby. She turned around once. Wyatt was already climbing, his shoulders straight, the sign against his back. She watched him for a moment. Then she turned back to the valley. She rode down, with Toby Callahan behind her on Solomon. Below them, the town of Red Willow shone in the afternoon sun. Small, broken, beginning to heal. Hannah Merritt, 18 years old, went home to her mother's kitchen. She was tired. She was going to bake bread in the morning. She was going to teach children in the afternoon. She was going to ride up the mountain on Sunday to see a sign. She was not going to become the man who had taken her mother. She was going to become the daughter her mother had raised. She thought, quietly as she rode, Mama, I hear you. I have heard you the whole time. The wildflower pressed inside her mother's Bible was still in the deep pocket of her father's coat. She could feel it against her heart. She was warm. She was going home. The mountain, behind her, watched her go. The mountain would be there tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, for anyone who needed it, forever.